Hey folks, it's Kim here again, the content marketing specialist for Covetris. So we got to episode 3 of Paws, Rewind and Play. Feels like a bit of a win here. We have another fantastic guest. Chris the Vet joins us to talk about things like why resilience is an overused word and not very helpful when it comes to coping with burnout. He wants us to think about it in a different way. His decade of experience, part-time TV exposure, and recent accreditation in small animal medicine makes for a compelling chat from a senior vet. He gives us advice on interpersonal skills, wellness plans, and client communication. He also talks about why things like the continuity of care really matters. So please tune in. Hi Chris, welcome to Paws, Rewind and Play. This is episode 3. We know that you have obviously worked alongside Rory the Vet, who is in episode 1. But as always, it's a pleasure to have guys like you. You obviously graduated in 2012 from the University of Glasgow. So you have almost a decade of experience. Do you want to just give us a little more information about yourself, an introduction, and how you came to be in the veterinary profession?
Yeah, no, I'd love to. It sounds quite scary when you say a decade.
Sorry, no pressure there. But hey, that's a wealth of experience to be proud of.
It's crept on quite quickly. I graduated 2012. I worked initially in mixed practice in rural Scotland, where I'm from, which was fantastic. It was a steep learning curve, and I really enjoyed the variability of the work. However, after 2 years, I went and travelled a little bit and worked abroad in different charity settings in Thailand and India. Before eventually returning to the UK. And I've been in small animal practice since. Been in London for the past 5 years now, I think. And focusing just on small animal work. And I've just completed my certificate last year in small animal medicine as well.
Nice. And obviously for the last year and a half, we've all been sequestered to the city or country that we were living in at the time of March 2020. So as we talk about the pandemic, obviously one of the biggest themes has been mental health, burnout, compassion fatigue. And I've had the same conversation with Elle, the positive vet nurse, and as I said, Rory, just because, as always, we think it's very important to highlight. So when we look at burnout, what are your biggest coping mechanisms? How do you deal with the stress?
So I think for me, my biggest coping mechanism with stress at work's always been physical exercise of some description. I used to be a swimmer back in the day, decade ago, whatever. And that was always quite a good stress reliever for me. And so I kind of sort of took that into sort of my working life as well. And so going to the gym has always been a really great thing for me. I can finish work, go straight there. It allows me time to decompress before I come home. So I don't just come home and stew in the kind of the afterthoughts of the day. Fortunately, the pandemic took that away from me and just reduced to doing kind of little workouts in my pokey little London flat, which...
In your box rooms.
Essentially, a tiny little bit of floor space, trying to do what you can. And yes, that wasn't great. And it meant if anything, I almost really valued more what these coping mechanisms can mean. And I did other things. I suppose like everyone did through the pandemic, as they learned new skills and stuff like that and tried new things and stuff. But
yeah, doing Udemy courses or picking up ukulele or something, right?
Yeah. I'm not that creative, but I think that's the important thing is find what you are kind of maybe more passionate about outside of work and utilize on that. And I'm not the most creative of people, but I've got lots of friends who are, and they rely on that as a de-stressing mechanism. Things as well. I think it's really, really important. Focus on those relationships outside of work and things as well. And good friend support groups and stuff. I mean, I got sick and fed up of those Zoom quizzes everyone was doing.
Oh God, I know.
I think we got to about the 10th one before we all realized we weren't actually enjoying them anymore, and we were just quite happy to chat instead. But it was still about having that connection with those friends that we relied upon so much outside of lockdown as well.
Yeah, I think Zoom fatigue is real. Can you tell me as well, like, as you talk about those coping mechanisms, I always wonder, because vets are often time poor, I just wonder how you manage to fit those exercises or activities into your day. How do you prioritize it?
I mean, it sounds really basic, but I think just by making it a priority, making it something you have to do. I mean, we do it with everyday tasks, like you prioritize eating a meal or brushing your teeth in the morning, like really little basic things. So it's about kind of giving it that strength of importance in your life. So I'll say, right, I have to go after work and things like that. No, some days I can't because I'm just too worn out, whatever. But if I have that kind of sort of mentality about it, it does kind of, it feels like almost a bit of a necessity. But I think you still need that flexibility to know when you're kind of just pushing it too much, you know? So it's a bit
of course. Just striking the balance.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because we absolutely wanted to encourage professionals or potentially even graduates that with all this talk around mental health, it was, okay, how do we avoid the path of resignation? How can we reignite the passion? And, you know, on that front, speaking about being passionate for your job and having high performance, what skills do you think are most important for being a high-performing individual and running the clinic successfully?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one because I've seen and read a few things recently where people use the term resilient. Now, unfortunately, that term doesn't sit too well with me because it sounds like you need to be tough, you need to be hard. And I think that's counterproductive in many cases. I think what we really need to be focusing on is creating and sort of nurturing work environments where you don't need to be resilient, where you can cope without having to toughen up, you know? And I think maybe resilience should be used in a different way, in that it's about having people who are maybe adaptable and feel comfortable and things like that, not about someone who's toughened up, you know?
That's a really interesting answer, because it's almost like it's overused and it might add a little bit more pressure onto someone where they feel guilty potentially for not being top notch or on top of their game all the time. So more about acceptance and flexing, as you say.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I think naturally a lot of us are perfectionists, and I think it's a dangerous kind of trait to bring to the profession, almost, in that when you're perfect, are you then hard on yourself? And I think, yeah, again, sort of striking that balance, because we obviously want to do the best that we can, but I think kind of maybe we need a bit more of a mentality change in terms of the environment that we're working in, you know, and a bit more of a focus on the team dynamics. I mean, as you mentioned, I work with Rory, who's a really good friend of mine, and I mean, I'm sure I hope he'd agree, but we've got a really, really fantastic team, and we all work so well together, which makes a huge difference. We've got supportive management, which I think you also really sort of appreciate during those tough times and things as well. And it's not just about kind of maybe changing sort of financial incentives in the profession and giving you better deals and things. It's more about kind of that ability to sort of fit into a team and feel comfortable and supportive, that I think makes such a huge difference. And I mean, yes, I suppose it's less of a skill as such, which I guess was your original question, but I think it's something that I've certainly identified over the years. I worked in different places, and my current job, I feel it's one it's got that pretty right, you know. It's never perfect, there's always room for development, but we do have it pretty good, and it's made a big difference over the past year. It's, as you said, it's been a really tough one. There's been times where I was really low. At one point, we had all sort of splintered into different clinics, and they were trying to avoid us mixing. And I was left in charge of one clinic by myself. And I enjoy sole charge work, so great initially, but eventually I realised I was kind of missing that team. So it made such a huge difference once I was back integrated with them again and things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, as you say, it's really critical to have that supportive network, the team dynamic, cultural fit, I suppose, where, you know, the staff are fully invested in your emotional, mental and professional well-being as well as anything else. So whether you're doing something solo or you're doing a bit of teamwork, then at least you sort of have that cushion there.
Definitely.
Yeah. So since we're talking about performance, let's move on to the learning aspect of things. I know that a lot of veterinary professionals and nurses and even, you know, the practice manager, the practice staff, it's really important to continue professional development. So has there been any sort of courses or again, you know, skills that you personally invest into or something that you constantly work on to keep up with what you're doing?
So as I mentioned earlier, I last year completed my certificate in small animal medicine. It took 3 years, so it's it's a fair investment of time. And there's other ways you can do it. And I mean, the way that this one actually worked really well for me is it was quite flexible. It was split into 6 terms total, and I could do them as and when I wanted, pretty much. So I could say, right, I'm having this summer off, or I'm going to do my next one in a year's time. And I had a much longer time frame to do it in as well. But that worked really nicely in the sense that it was structured. I was kind of not being spoon-fed anything, but I had a structure to follow, because I think, and this goes back to what I was saying in terms of when you prioritize your own time, I mean, maybe this is just me personally, but I think we can all sometimes be a bit prone to sort of these kind of executive dysfunctions or procrastinations when we get to the end of a long day, that you say, right, no, I can't focus on doing that and things. And having that structure did really help kind of push me with it. And I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. And I think kind of most of us in this profession, so vets and vet nurses in particular, we enjoy learning. Ultimately, despite being a practical job, there's very academic elements to it. And we want to improve our standard and our quality of care. And if you can find courses and sort of CPD that is relevant to that you can apply to practice, it makes it so much more rewardable.
Mm-hmm. How many hours a week would you say you dedicate to CPT, or is it does it change every time?
Changes. I mean, I'm having a bit of a break now after doing that big long.
Of course, yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean that was. I think they advise about 6 hours a week, which is to juggle on top of everything else. In reality, did I do 6 hours of work a week? Probably not. I'd probably end up cramming a little bit more if I had a report to get it. Say I did a lot more work weeks. But the fact it was structured meant I knew what I still had to do and things as well. So you could be a little bit more.
Yeah, and it puts a benchmark into someone's mind about what they potentially need to work towards. Exactly.
But developing those passions in the career is really important as well. I mean, as you mentioned about burnout, I think kind of having that focus and that passion still and kind of keeping that fire burning is really great. But you can also, I think, focus on sort of maybe things that are less applicable to your kind of practical work and things. And a few years ago, I did a mental health first aid certificate. It's just like a 2-day course run by Public Health England. And it's essentially the same kind of theory as physical first aid, but on a mental health aspect. And I went into it being like, this would be a really good skill to develop. Obviously can bring maybe something to the team, so on, so on, so on. And I ended up coming out of it feeling I'd just been to therapy for 2 days. And I found it so useful on a personal level as well, in terms of kind of identifying what your stresses are, identifying what your coping mechanisms are, whether the negative mechanisms or the positive ones that you want to develop. And obviously sort of learning about lots of stuff you can bring to a team and identify with other people, but also a lot of self-reflection in that. So I think if you do find those courses, although some of them might be a communication skills course or a counselling client through bereavement course, I think some of them might sound a little bit dry and a little bit boring, but I think if you invest in them, a lot of them, you can actually gain a lot personally from them as well.
Yeah, I mean, once again, I do think it's the balance of looking at softer skills, interpersonal skills, or even things that help you with your mental well-being, as well as the hard skills and the technical courses that you need to do to fulfill your day-to-day job. And have you seen like significant differences in how that translates in when you're dealing with clients, for example?
Yeah, I think a really useful thing to bring to work is empathy for clients. Obviously, we care about the animal. That's sort of unanimous amongst the profession. But I think sometimes, particularly when you're having those tough days, it can be sometimes a little bit hard to sympathize with that client who's maybe being a bit short with you, or they're a little bit fed up of waiting, or they're not happy about cost. And it can be a little bit challenging to kind of go in and kind of understand them in those situations. But I think just knowing that everyone's got their own battles that they're potentially going through, and I think if you approach these situations with kindness and kind of sort of an open mind, without kind of sort of shutting off this client in the first instance, I think kind of that does make a difference. And I found kind of knowing that kind of what their sphere of reference is going to be very different from mine, and just bringing that to contact, I think actually really helped with communication skills.
Yeah.
I mean, a big focus of mental health first aid is actually just listening. And you've got some clients who could talk your ear off, that could go on for days.
Yeah. I'm curious, because we spoke a lot about mental health, and we just actually did a blog on compassion fatigue. So when you spoke about kindness there, how do you make sure that you don't run out of kindness, like this waterfall of kindness? Because you have to be compassionate almost every second of the day, and then you have compassion fatigue. So how do you address that?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, and some days it almost feels like you're running short on it. But I think finding ways of replenishing that pool of kindness, or hypothetical pool, that's why I think kind of sort of having that team around you in that workplace atmosphere, I think makes a huge difference. I know I draw on that massively. Like if I was maybe running behind with consults because one of them's turned into a euthanasia, say, and it's sort of obviously quite a draining thing. Having one of my colleagues turn around and say, look, I'll cover your next consult. So it just, stress just leaves you, and you feel more relaxed. And that kindness that you've been given, you almost like transfer, if that makes sense.
Paying it forward.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, even yesterday, come to think of it, I had a client who I was doing paperwork for, and she said, I can tell you guys are really busy at the moment. Don't stress about it. I'll pick it up tomorrow. And it's, again, something that's weight lifted. And I just think sort of them paying us this as well, something that maybe we need to remember. That I think we reciprocate it. And I think it's potentially sometimes very easy to go into a consult and just be like, right, I'm just going to get this done. Not that you'd ever want to be short with them or anything like that, but you could maybe forget that this might be really difficult for them to be there. And I think just, yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of that line actually when I was interviewing Rory. He said one of the most important coping mechanisms was talking about it, but not just talking about it, talking to vets, because you guys will understand each other. And that's how you will have the sort of supportive environment that enables you to continue doing the job and not having a complete mental breakdown. So whether you're kind of covering for each other or just kind of, doing a favor, helping each other out. That's nice. So let's move on to the next question. which is about digital transformation. Obviously, we've seen a huge paradigm shift because of the pandemic. Well, it's been exacerbated by the pandemic, where people have had to do things virtually. We probably had to do a lot of teleconsults. I wonder what tools and technologies you found useful that, again, has enabled you and your team to run the clinic successfully.
Yeah, so I'm a bit of a technical, as you can probably tell from my setup of the. But I love client communication. I think it's actually a really rewarding part of the job, and it's a really vital part of the job, obviously, as well. And I enjoy medical cases, so I like to get the client on board. I want them to be decision-making process to see the progress, hopefully, that the patient will be making, I think, as well. Now, I find actual digital aspects make that so much easier. And we've got quite an intuitive practice management system in place, sort of integrated with all diagnostics and things. So I can quite quickly send an owner an email with the blood results and a brief description of it. Now, if I'm describing that on the phone, I'll be sort of shouting random numbers at them saying, oh yeah, the creatinine is 139 when it should be under 120, blah, 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 and so on. And that's just going to not sink in with them. Whereas if they're given sort of graphics and things like that, then it makes it a lot easier. So I think some of those things automatically click straight away with me, rather than calling, emailing, and having all the resources available. And also having that sort of practice management software makes a big difference in terms of me being able to see results and things like that. Well, I can call up other records or x-rays and things like that and quite quick. So have a little look at them when I'm sure I don't need to run through and look at the x-ray machine and blood machine, whatever. So that made a huge difference as well, I think. Telemedicine's been an interesting one. I think, like lots of practices, we made a quite abrupt shift to it without us. None of us are obviously having any formal training in it. So it was quite new initially. Did I click with it? Did I get on with it? I don't know. I see huge benefits to it. I think there's some really useful aspects to it. Ultimately, though, I still much prefer a physical consultation and examining an animal myself.
Yes.
Fortunately, a lot of owners aren't necessarily the best at handling their own pets as much as I want to say otherwise. And therefore, actually, sometimes sort of the examination parts where it's really limited. Where it's really useful is actually getting the history and all that information, which half the time is as much part of the diagnosis as being able to actually physically examine them as well. So I think it's got a place, and I think we still need to try and work out exactly where that is in the day-to-day vetting. But I think it's got a very good place in terms of triage. I think it's where it's most useful is what needs to come in, what doesn't need to come in. And I think we've learned from it in the sense that we rarely do proper telemedicine consults now, but I know there's other services that offer telemedicine consults, and we'll liaise with them sometimes, which can be useful. But we do a lot more sort of email and photo and video triage than we used to. The typical one, maybe the dog or cat's got a little wound or a bleeding boot or something like that. The owner just emails in a picture. Does it need seen? No, it's a minor wound. The owner can just clean it. We can give a bit of advice over the phone or via email. Saves the owner a bit of money, but also take some of the slack off of what could be a really, really busy day with additional consults being squeezed in. I'm in support of it. I think we just need to further maybe iron out the creases and find out exactly how we integrate it into kind of our standard practice.
Mm-hmm. What I'm hearing are the major benefits of a practice management system is that you have ease of access and the information at a glance that you need to see about a patient's history or a patient's record. And then, as you say, with the client themselves, that engagement is that you're able to follow up with them, give them the reassurance, potentially build the rapport and the trust, explain something to them in layman's terms, which you might not have been able to easily explain over the phone with numbers and stats. I really do think that's the way forward for clinics, is just optimizing all of these processes. And it's so encouraging to hear guys like you confirm that, where you were saying, yeah, it makes your jobs easier.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not necessarily just making our job easier; it's making it better for the pets.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
One of the big, I wouldn't say issues. One of the big things that we do try in our practice and across the profession is continuity of care, and it can be very challenging if you've got a pet with a wound that's not healing very well, or maybe they've got an ulcer on their eye. So these things that can be quite rapidly changing day to day, and they're coming in for regular rechecks. Now, we can't work every day, okay? And so you can't see the same vet every time you come in. But if we've got photos that are quickly there at a glance on the file, so you can literally just be like, right, that was it 2 days ago, this is it now. You've got this kind of storyline of these images and things like that. So that's just one situation where you find that actually having a system like that just makes a massive difference. Blood results, weights, you can plot weight loss in a pet and things like that as well when we're doing weight management clinics and things like that. It's just all these things really facilitate the day-to-day work.
Mm-hmm. It's all the detail that you need without being overwhelming, but on the screen in front of you.
Yeah.
On the note of continuity of care, what's your opinion or thoughts on wellness plans? Because I know that, like, obviously with certain pets and ailments and treatments, like, you want to have a follow-up plan or continually check in. Wellness plan is slightly different in that it's a way for pet parents to be proactive about their animal's health, but also a way for clinics to generate a constant stream of revenue. Is that something that you guys do at your clinic?
Yeah, so we have quite a well-established pet healthcare plan. I think they're actually really good. They need to be utilised correctly. We occasionally get some clients who they ignore the texts that come out and they ignore the emails that come out to them.
Yeah.
And behind on the flea treatment. Now, yes, they then inevitably at some point come in with fleas and aren't too happy that they didn't keep up to date on it, things. And obviously, without pointing fingers, there has to be a part of responsibility on the owner. We can't hold through everything. But I think generally they're really good at keeping people up to date with it. And I think in a profession at the moment that's pretty overwhelmed with sick animals coming in just because of the sheer sort of upscaling of numbers in terms of pet ownership, having preventative healthcare there is vital, because I don't want to spend my day looking at fleas, to be honest. I'd much rather
That's a fair point.
The more complicated, intricate cases that need that time spent with them.
Yeah.
Have all these preventative things in place, then it massively reduces the demands on the team in these ways. And I think also what I really enjoy about them as well is I think it without sounding too old school about the profession and being the whole kind of family vet who sort of village vet, that sort of James Herriot vibe, I think it bonds clients to practice a lot. And I think obviously, yes, the financial side of it, I'm not too personally concerned about the business aspect. I realize it's important, but to me, it's really nice because you've got clients that are coming in fairly regularly. They know staff, they know the people on the front of house, they know some of the nursing teams on the nail clip last week or whatever. And we'll have clients be like, oh yeah, no, Coco or whatever his name is really good with this nurse kind of thing. So it's that bond, and I think we've got a lot of there, and that does mean inevitably, unfortunately, when animals do get ill, the clients engaged from the start. They understand, and they're kind of sort of with you for that process from the beginning, just because you've already done that hard work. And I think practice healthcare plans actually really promote that.
Yeah, and I think it's about setting the precedents as well, because obviously during the pandemic, well, there's been the puppy pandemic, So the UK alone has acquired an extra 3 million pets, which is insane, but it does mean a lot more work for you guys. And I guess just, yeah. I mean, you've got your normal demand outside of proactive and preventative healthcare, and then if you're introducing pet health plans, once again, it's striking that right balance. So no, this has been a really interesting conversation, because I feel like you've touched on parts where you talk about the prioritization and triaging. How do you order that throughout your day? We spoke about mental health and the certain courses that you can do for CPD, continued professional development. I guess we could, any parting thoughts? Do you have any highlights or takeaways for people thinking about entering the profession, or new graduates that are just starting out?
I think just embrace it. I think you have to love the profession and the work you do to make it. And don't commit yourself to it. Make sure you, like I said, prioritize your time outside of it, and you have that life balance. But also embrace all parts of the profession, what we do as caregivers for animals and team members, to your colleagues, and communicating to the owners. I think all these parts of it are vital, and you have to embrace every single part of it.
Yeah, it's just part of the growth journey, and potentially be part of the wild ride, but, without that, growth, right? Yeah. Well, it's been wonderful chatting to you. We really appreciate your insights, and potentially, we might collaborate in the future. And I know that our listeners will definitely value the advice that's given in this episode. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Take care.
You probably noticed there is a reoccurring theme across our episodes so far. Of course, a lot of the chat has been about mental health, but we feel absolutely it is 100% critical to be addressing all issues that relate to this area, just because we all know how sobering it is, how heartbreaking it is, I suppose is the word. Any suicide is devastating. Every life matters. So we're here to provide that support, to have continued conversations around it, and in particular with the conversation with Chris, when we talk about discovering and maintaining your kindness tank, so to speak, making sure that does not run out. How can you balance that out? I think it's been sort of refreshing to hear, and again, it's just dealing with the compassion fatigue in a realistic way. Of course, we acknowledge it's tough, but like Chris said, if we can find ways of replenishing those things, and then it's a better way of dealing with not just your job but life in general. So we hope that you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. We'll talk to you soon with our upcoming episode.